life is a mess and you're totally stressed out, just call Trent. Just call Trent. When your wife is cold as ice and you need some advice, just call Trent. Just call Trent. He'll shoot it straight and he won't say no. He'll just give you that advice and say, well, there you go.
Oh, hello and welcome to another episode of There You Go with Trent Mabry. I, of course, am your host, Trent Mabry. It's another special episode this week. This week I talked to comedy writer Steve Young. He was a longtime writer for Letterman, also wrote for The Simpsons. We talked about all that. We talked about his great documentary that he stars in called Bathtubs Over Broadway. I really recommend it. We talked about starting out writing for the Harvard Lampoon, getting started writing for Letterman, a bunch of great stories from that. So here it is, my talk with Steve Young. So thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in semi-rural Massachusetts, a town called Pepperell, which most people, even in Massachusetts, have not necessarily heard of, but it was about an hour northwest of Boston, out past most of the bigger, more suburban areas. So there were fields and forests and stuff to run around in. So it was kind of a country life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when did you realize you wanted to do something with comedy?
I didn't really know that it was an option. I guess I knew I was occasionally a funny kid and had some flair for humor. But growing up when I did in the 70s and 80s, very different world. It was not media saturated in the way that it is now.
Right.
Someone like me out in the country probably wouldn't know that such careers were even possible. Yes, I was watching TV and there were sitcoms or whatever. And I never really thought about whether, oh, is that a job I could do? It just somehow didn't connect. Even the first time I saw the David Letterman show in the early 80s, and it made me howl with laughter to the point where I was on the floor, doubled up in the fetal position, struggling to breathe for like 20 minutes. It was this watershed moment of my life in some ways. And yet after that, I did not really think, oh, that's what I want to do. I just couldn't connect to how does one person go from watching TV to being involved in it. I lacked the imagination, I guess, to even construct that ambition. But then I was at college and I was on the humor magazine, which was the Harvard Lampoon, and there were a lot of people who'd come out of that organization,
Right.
gone on to working for the Letterman Show or Saturday Night Live. Conan O'Brien was the president of the magazine when I got there, and he was, oh my God, this guy is impressive. Whatever he's got, I want to get some of that. So that was what really kicked me over to thinking that maybe this is something I could do. And then a few years later, I was at the Letterman Show, the show that had put me on the floor so hard when I was a teenager. So it kind of was a surprising full circle.
Yeah. So how did you get into the Lampoon?
That is a wonderful, weird little organization. It goes back to the 1870s. Founded by a bunch of, just privileged young white men who had the world at their feet and lots of family money. Eventually, a few of them got together and built a strange little castle on this pie-shaped wedge of land off Harvard Square. And so suddenly the Lampoon had a clubhouse. So it was a magazine, but it was also a social organization. And when I got to campus as a freshman, I didn't really even know what it was, but I went to a meeting and thought, oh yeah, I should do this. And then I never got around to it that first year. my sophomore year, I thought, okay, what was this again? I got to take this seriously. So you go back and sit in the room with all the other prospective people, and Conan O'Brien comes out and talks, and he's hilarious. And you think, yeah, I want this. And you had to write sample humor pieces, pretty much anything you wanted that you thought were funny, and throw them on the floor of the certain room in the building, and staff members would come in and read all the pieces that people were sending in or dropping off, and they would write comments on the back about, well, this is a pretty good idea, but you might want to think about this. So there was a certain amount of real people taking it seriously and trying to encourage each other. I'm sure some people were not well suited to it at all and just stopped. I seem to have gotten a hold of something there and got some very encouraging early comments. So I was thinking, yes, maybe this is my future. Could I have a future? I'm 19 or whatever it is. Do I even dare think about my future? But yes, that worked out wonderfully well. I got on the staff of the magazine and had a wonderful few years there. And we did some summer projects. We did a very elaborately produced parody of USA Today that got us some attention. Lampoon still does big projects every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it has produced a lot of very funny, talented people.
Yeah, I read one of your articles, the products for the tough.
Oh, was that in a little anthology book?
I was just on the website. They have like some archive stuff.
Wow, I ought to look up this website. I guess I'm behind the curve on that. But well, that's an interesting little thought experiment right there. Does it stand up 35 years later or whatever?
I thought it held up.
Okay.
And it was also like kind of like it would have been a perfect bit for the Late Show as well, I thought.
Well, that's interesting. I did not even in the early days think that would be necessarily what my career would be. But as I was on the Lampoon and was thinking, oh yeah, what should I do? And I even then wasn't watching the Letterman show all that often. I just wasn't in the habit of watching
Mm-hmm.
TV at night. And in those days, you had to stay up and watch it because there were not too many people had VCRs and there was nothing streaming or on no internet. But yeah, it turned out to be the perfect home for me for a long time. Just my sensibility interlocked well with what Dave Letterman liked to do and what the show's style and voice liked to do. So yes, looking back, I guess that is a good little foreshadowing.
Yeah. So you graduate, and then are you like, what do you do? Or you said you weren't really thinking it could be a career. So what are you doing?
Well, I think by the time I got out of college, I was thinking, okay, well, I don't really have any other ideas
Mm-hmm.
or prospects. I mean, there were lots of kids at Harvard and probably all these other colleges who were very early on slotted into some pathway that all right, I'm going to be a guy or a woman who wears a suit and works for an investment bank and as a management consultant. And I don't know how those people get that idea or get brought along that path, but there were a lot of people by the time I was graduating who were somehow on a path, and maybe it's just family tells you, oh, that's what you should do, or maybe people have a deep burning desire to be a management consultant. I don't know. I was this liberal arts guy who had no particular solid plan, and I've been extraordinarily lucky. I got out of college, but really for the first couple of years I was kind of kicking around Boston. I was a bartender for a while. I wrote a few humor pieces, National Lampoon and other magazines. I did have an agent through some great good luck. An agent with William Morris had called up the Lampoon's castle at one point.
Oh, okay.
And said, yeah, I'm looking for interesting young writers to check out and maybe represent or whatever. And I thought, William Morris, why is the cigarette company? See, this is a different lifetime ago now, where maybe you know perfectly well what William Morris is and all these Hollywood institutions. I had zero idea, so I was quickly disabused of the notion about the cigarette company. I wrote a Cheers spec script, which this guy liked and said, yeah, I'll take you on. I mean, it shouldn't have been that easy. It usually isn't.
Mm-hmm.
They thought, well, the Lampoon has a good track record, so we'll scrape up some young people in their formative years here. And the agent got me my first job, which was at not necessarily the News in LA. And that was one of the few times that I've known of an agent actually getting someone a job. I think usually, and I've learned this more and more over the years, it's you're expected to build your own network and find your own gigs, and agents kind of nail down the best deal for you. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe it was a bit of an outlier for an agent to get me a job, but I was very happy. And once you get one job, it's easier to get the next one and the next one, etc. So
Right.
that was not a long gig. I was only up there for about 6 weeks, but suddenly I had an actual TV credit, and I joined the Writers Guild, and then I had some good samples to put in for my next job, which was back in New York, which was the young fledgling comedy channel before it was Comedy Central.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was the late 80s into 1990, and I worked there for like 6 months, met some other wonderful people. But that's when the grapevine in New York was buzzing. Oh, a bunch of Letterman writers are leaving the show. Now's the time to pile on with your writing submission. This is it. So I joined that stampede, and luckily caught the eye of the head writer, and there it was, 1990, and then that was my next 25 years.
Yeah. So what was included in the packet, like monologue jokes, sketches, stuff like
Uh,
that?
I don't remember much about that packet. I know there were probably a couple top tens.
Mm-hmm.
That was the kind of the signature piece, and even in the much later years, writing submissions usually would include top 10 lists. So I mean, that was kind of a great, conceptually easy way to get going with something on the page. I probably had some miscellaneous other ideas. I'm sure most of them were not quite right or quite good, but the head writer, Steve O'Donnell, a
Mm-hmm.
great friend and comic genius, saw some potential there that he thought he could work with. And in those days, the show was still in the NBC era. It was sort
Right.
of the weird experimental 1:30 in the morning or 12:30 to 1:30 in the morning show.
Mm-hmm.
Was not quite the corporate juggernaut of streamlined comedy that it would become later. And there was, I think, a feeling like we can still be a little weirder and a little more rough edged and experimental. And he saw something that he thought he could work with there. So I kind of straddled the two eras of the show, the sort of older uh, late night with David Letterman, and then I was on the CBS show, the Late Show, which was the 11:30 show, and a bit of a different feeling to it, although also outstanding in many ways for a
Right.
long time. But the show evolved definitely.
Yeah. Do you remember the first joke you got on?
Oh, let's see. Well, I remember a bit that I had very early on in the NBC show where coming back from a commercial, usually there's applause from the audience when you're coming back from the commercial, but there's no applause. And Dave looked up, oh, we're having trouble with the applause sign. And it was this like electric sign that had, you could turn to different settings. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like, instead of applause, it was blinking like a hostile silence or something. Oh yeah, that's not right. Okay, we're advancing. It was like clicked over to sing show tunes, and the audience, a bunch of them got into it and started. Oh no, we don't want that, and it finally got it back to applause, and then so that was nice because a show like that had the budget and talented people to build props and scenery and costumes, and you could actually make somewhat complex ideas happen.
Right.
That was a great thing about a show like that. You could imagine something, and if it got through the approval pipeline, you'd be impressed by the production muscle that went into it.
Yeah. So what would be like a day like at the show? Were you writing mostly monologue jokes, or were you writing desk pieces and bits like that, or?
Kind of all over the map. I ran the monologue from 2004 till the end in 2015. So during that period, a lot of my day was consumed with reading monologue jokes that were coming in from our monologue writers, seeing which jokes Dave was picking when he would get the pages for his perusal. And then I would say, all right, we've got 9 jokes. We really need more. We need more on this topic, this topic. I'd be in touch with monologue writers about what else we needed, working with the cue card department to get everything ready. So some of it was administrative and managerial like that, but every day it was also uh, in the mornings we would have a meeting. All right, what's in the news? What are our ideas for bits, whether it's a fake commercial or some live interruption in the studio or whatever. And all the writers would come in with pitches for things inspired by what was in the news or not in the news. We still, to the very end, did retain some flavor of that out of left field, just purely weird inspiration, which I loved. And we kept some of that DNA all the way through the show's history, but a lot of it was topical by the end.
Mm-hmm.
So writers would pitch things. The head writer would say, okay, you write that. That sounds good. You write that. Then it would be this mad dash over several hours to produce bits, working with the edit room and the graphics department and finding some stock music and the graphics people and blah, 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 making the little bits to show to Dave while also writing the top 10 list or whatever other comedy emergencies were coming up. So every day it felt like you were just on this fast treadmill, but it was great because you knew by late afternoon, one way or another, when the dust settled, that would be done. And you would triumph or tragedy, you would start again the next day with a blank slate. And that's intimidating, but it's also great. Any day you come in might be your hottest day ever with your best idea.
Right. So the show's been off like 6 years now?
Yes, coming up on 6 years, yeah.
What's something you miss and what's something you don't miss?
I miss the people. It really, when you're working with people like that for many years, there was a core of people who really did stay with the show for years or decades in some cases.
Mm.
And they were loyal to Dave and to the show, and Dave showed them great loyalty as well. And you felt like, wow, I'm really part of something that's not just about today's George Bush joke or whatever. It's like,
right.
All right, today we're going over the top of the trenches again into battle, and we're all going to look out for each other and try to get through this as humanely as we can. And it's going to be a crazy few hours dashing down the afternoon to airtime. But you did feel like if you have the great joke today, God bless you, just as long as someone does. I don't care if it's me. Hopefully someday my turn will come up and I'll have a great joke. But if you win, we all win. There really was that feeling among the writers and the whole production staff. Like we just want to, however it juggles out in one particular day, just if we can get something we're all proud of and that Dave laughs at and is excited to put on the air, then that was a great feeling. So I miss the people and that spirit. I don't miss worrying about like all the people at these late night shows for the past 4 or 5 years who've had to think about Donald Trump
right
on a daily basis and how to put what is maybe the least funny situation of my lifetime into comedy.
right
And some people are built for that in a very specific satirical way. I was not particularly, I mean, we could all sort of branch into different directions. I did some political bits occasionally that were okay, and current events things could do okay. But I think I was really born to be more the weirdly surreal, unexpected stuff that Conan O'Brien also fantastic at. So maybe that's why I clicked with him early on, and I've enjoyed watching his show here and there over the years, and just been so impressed with him and what he's done. But I was glad that I was not walking through the swamp every day of trying to deal with the political situation through comedy. And we would have done it. We would have done a good job. Dave would have figured out his unique take on it and would have been part of the conversation. But I don't know if it would have mattered. It felt like none of these shows really changed anything. They were just talking to their own audiences. So I miss certain kinds of predictability of the rhythm of life. You would know months and months in advance what weeks we were shooting and doing shows, what weeks were going to be vacations. You could plan your life.
mm-hmm.
And now life has much less structure for me. And but I mean, I relish the opportunity to build new habits of my own work and not being told turn this in 20 minutes. Just got to keep building the muscles of, well, today, what am I going to work on? All right, I'm going to spend a few hours on this writing project and a few hours on that one. I'm going to make it happen, and nobody is going to have it on their desk at 5 p.m., but I'm still going to make a go of being a writer who doesn't need to be told what to do.
Right. Yeah. So, say like a guy like Martin Short would come on. Would you help a guy like that with ideas for bits he would do on the show?
There were some guests that did work with the writers. It was not that large a list of people. Bill Murray, Steve Martin, Bruce Willis.
Yeah, he was always good on
it.
Yeah.
So we had fun working with him, all those guys. And Martin Short liked to do the elaborate songs. I was not in the subgroup that had gotten a hold of that, although I did get to meet Marty, as I call him, a little bit later on, and he ended up in Bathtubs Over Broadway, as you probably will remember. Yes, so I was very glad to get a little connection to him with that. And then I worked on the show later, Maya and Marty, the Lorne Michaels prime time variety show that he was on with
Maya Rudolph.
Maya Rudolph, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was a interesting crew of people cycling in every day at the Letterman show, and I didn't interact with a lot of the big name guests. We were kind of like our own department, but sometimes, it was like, I don't know, some Bruce Willis or Dr. Phil or somebody wants a bit or a funny prop or something. It'd be fun to work up something for them.
Did you leave the show to write The Simpsons, or were you on the show and wrote The Simpsons in your...
I was able to do that without leaving the show. I did time my trip to California to be in the writer's room out there to coincide with a week off from the Letterman show. And other than that, it was just a little part-time job at night working up the episode outline and the first draft, which then once I handed off, it was taken over by the full staff and polished. And that's how that kind of show works. One writer's name may be on an episode, but generally it's all very collaborative. So I came in on an episode where they'd had the beginnings of an idea already, and I was there while we all fleshed it out, and lots of people had ideas and suggestions, and then it was sort of winnowed down to what it was.
So did they ask you to come over and do the episode, or were you...
That, I think, was another example. Okay, I will give credit where credit's due. My agent at the time said, "Oh, we ought to get you, see if we can get some other kind of credit under your belt." And I said, "Well, I know a lot of the Simpsons writers. Should we?" "Oh, yeah, let's see if we can make that happen." And again, a simpler era. I don't think they do the freelance episodes anymore, but at the time, back in the 90s, it seemed like 1 or 2 episodes a season. They would have an outside writer come in and work with the staff and get something going. And so I did one of those. My friend Steve O'Donnell did at least one. A couple other people I know have their sort of one-off Simpsons episodes. So that was very, very fun experience to be in that room full of really high-level comedy geniuses. And it's hard work, and I think they did and probably still do work long days, because an A- isn't enough. All right, somewhere out there is the A+ joke. Let's try to get to it. So there was that ethos that I admired.
Yeah. I watched that episode a couple days ago. It's a very good episode.
Yeah, it was from that period. Some people say a certain range of the first, I don't know, however many seasons were considered quite excellent. And I have seen the episode myself a few times in recent years. Yeah, I think it's still all right. A few jokes of mine in there that made it, but yeah, it was a hugely collaborative effort.
Right. Now tell me a little bit. I watched Bathtubs Over Broadway last night too. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Well, that has been a great deal of my last few years. It was in progress during the Letterman show. For any viewers that are not sure what we're talking about, it's a documentary feature film that I'm the main subject of, but it's about a topic that grew out of my work at the Letterman show. We used to do a bit called Dave's Record Collection, one of the real found item comedy bits, in this case with weird record albums that Dave would hold up and we'd play a sample and he'd have a joke and we would move on to the next one. I had to go find the record albums. And this was back in the early 90s when I was kind of doing this in the heyday of that record collection piece. And I started finding these mysterious souvenir albums from company meetings and conventions that were musicals. And I was just conceptually flabbergasted. How can there possibly be a fully produced original musical about selling diesel engines or being a Coca-Cola bottler or about selling insurance? And so I just loved the insanity of that. These things were written only to be seen by the sales force and distributors or whatever in a company. I just thought, this is so wrong. It's right. I love the fact that this exists. But then what put it over the top for me was a lot of it was actually unbelievably good. A lot of it was just shockingly catchy and witty and beautifully produced. And as I learned over time, when I started digging into this, these industrial shows were chock full of very high level Broadway talent, both the writers and the performers. I learned eventually, if you know anything about Broadway, you know these names. I didn't growing up. I had zero familiarity with this world. I didn't know who Sheldon Harnick and Jerry Bach were. And then to me, they were the guys who wrote the Ford Tractor musical. No, it turns out they wrote Ford on the Roof. John Kander and Fred Ebb. I had no idea that they were Cabaret in Chicago. To me, they were the General Electric Utility Executive Conference musical guys. So I had this enormous education to embark on, but all in the context of this is the strangest genre of music that I've ever imagined. I couldn't have imagined it. And it's great. And almost no one in the world even knows it exists because all these records were pressed a couple hundred or a couple thousand just for people within the company. They were never in stores. They were never reviewed. They were never on the radio. It was like a musical as elaborate and top shelf quality as My Fair Lady or Hello Dolly or anything else, and only a handful of people on earth know about it. And so the documentary follows my deep dive into this world, not only learning about this, but meeting the people who wrote these things and the people who performed in these things, all of whom were absolutely sure that no one would ever know about what they did, and that it was beyond their comprehension that someone would knock on their door or call them on the phone and say, we really need to talk about this fluorescent light fixture. So a friend of mine who's also a record collector, a guy named Sport Murphy, he also loved these records. We wrote a book together, came out a few years ago, and that got some good attention. And I got to go on the Letterman show as a guest and a few other places. And that kind of got it on the map. And then a friend of mine from the Letterman show, an editor who had left the show and was now starting to work in movies and documentaries, a woman named Dava Whisenant, said, I want to do a documentary about this. This is unbelievable. This is such a vast, weird, rich, shockingly strange world. And you made these connections now with people. What attracted her was not only the subject matter, which was crazy, and the songs were so deliciously weird, but I was meeting people and becoming really emotionally involved with people who now in their 70s, 80s, 90s were having this unexpected chapter in their lives where somebody cared about what they had worked on in 1967 that only 200 shoe salesmen had ever heard before. So the documentary follows that. It's full of crazy music and original vintage film footage, but also it's about me being somebody who goes from sort of cynical skepticism, this hardened comedy jerk who doesn't think anything's funny anymore, to suddenly becoming connected to these people who were wonderfully talented creators and performers who made this deal in their lives that no one's ever going to understand what we did. And I get to say, surprise, no, we're going to talk about it, and it's great. And a lot of people who've seen the movie thought it would be just this funny sort of snarky trifle.
Yeah.
Turns out people are quite moved. David did an astonishing job building this thing that turns out to be about much more than you think it'll be.
Yeah, I found it really endearing. It was yeah. I went into it not like expecting it to be what you said, like just a wacky story about these weird musicals. Then you get connected to the people. It's really good.
Yeah, it is more than people think they're getting into. And we were on the film festival circuit for about a year. Premiered at Tribeca in the spring of 2018. Dava won the award for Best New Documentary Director. She's won the Writers Guild Award for Best Documentary Screenplay. There's a whole truckload of audience favorite awards and jury awards for Best Documentary. So we were traveling around for about a year, and then it went on Amazon and iTunes, where you can still find it. Netflix, it's gone on and now off, although if you have fans and viewers in the UK and Australia, it's currently on Netflix overseas. And
I'm huge in Australia. So.
Okay. You're about to get a lot bigger. And we have a soundtrack album that's digital, but also a beautiful double record vinyl set. So it's been an amazing flowering of something that started as the tiniest possible little crumbs of a clue that something was weird when I held up the first couple records in the early 90s and thought, how can this be real? And Dave Letterman is an executive producer of the movie. He's in the movie. I get to interview him, which was an exciting and rare treat.
Mm.
And I think he took a lot of pride in the fact that this phenomenon that no one saw coming grew out of the work for his show, and that he was in on the early stages of it before anyone, including me or him, really knew what we were getting into.
Are you still in touch with some of the people?
From the industrial world, yes. Yeah. Talk to Hank Beebe about once a week.
Oh, yeah?
He's 94, lives up in Portland, Maine, with his wonderful wife, Nancy, who was also a highly accomplished and fascinating person. I really feel like they've been a great part of my life for these many years now. A few other people who you'll recall from the movie did not live to see the movie be finished, but I'm still in touch with families. The woman who sang the sort of beautiful, weird anthem about bathrooms,
mm-hmm.
The woman who sang My Bathroom Pat, I still talk to her. Yeah, these people have become a sort of cosmic extra family for me.
Now, you started that before you knew Dave was retiring, right?
Right. Yeah. The documentary was, I guess, early 2014 was when Dave began shooting. And we found out in April of 2014, if I recall, it may have been right around this time in April, that he was going to retire, he announced. So that was kind of a left turn in making the movie that David didn't anticipate. And then it turned out to be a wonderful extra element, because we were the only crew or production ever allowed to shoot backstage or in the offices of the Letterman show. So it turns out to also be this document and tribute to the final stages of the Late Show, with everybody winding down and saying goodbye. And that's very touching for a lot of people who were there at the time.
Yeah, it was interesting to see kind of how your journey like fit with the musical, because you see like they just throw the set into the dumpster. You see, would you get a piece of the bridge? It looked like
I did. I have a couple fragments I saved, but yes, you're very, very perceptive there about what Dava realized, which was I've been engaged in finding out about this art form, which was ephemeral and generally was considered to be ready for the trash can as soon as the Chrysler Plymouth dealer show was over, or whatever it was. And here I was working on a show that was suddenly going to be over and not forgotten, but still a rather abrupt finish. And yeah, a lot of stuff was just going into dumpsters at a high rate.
It's great, crazy.
It was shocking to a lot of people. Things were saved and pieces were saved for posterity and all that. But yeah, there's that moment late in the movie where it's the day after the final show and I'm wandering around and I'm pulling fragments of splintered late show sets out of a dumpster. And I love how David did that, because the whole adventure began with me looking through stuff that had been discarded and deemed not worth anyone's time. And here I am still, after all this, thinking there's got to be good stuff in this dumpster. What's really worth saving here?
Yeah.
So that's a big message of the movie.
Yeah. And you said like the great thing about the show is it being silly. Speaking of silly, the celebrity gum.
Oh yeah. That was a very silly project that I would do. I had to be up near Dave's dressing room every afternoon at a certain part of the afternoon, working on the monologue and make sure, okay, he cut this joke. Okay, how about we put this in? Just hovering at the sort of periphery there, I would stand by this window, and I noticed after a while out on the outside window ledge was a piece of gum someone had stuck out. Who knows when? I eventually found out who and when, but at first it was just this lump of discarded gum. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll do a sort of photo essay of a lump of gum through the seasons of summer, winter, and fall, unchanging as the city swirls around it. And yeah, it'd be pretty boring. But then I realized at a certain time every day, limos and big SUVs were pulling up right below there on the street. And why, there's George Clooney waving to the crowd. There's Tom Cruise. It's Julia Roberts. So if I line it up right, every day I could take a picture of some celebrity guest arriving and waving to the paparazzi and the fans. And in the foreground, every day is the same unchanging, dirty, sooty piece of gum. And it was ridiculous and stupid. And it gained some sort of grandeur just through persistence and repetition. And I showed Dave, I think for his birthday at one point, I made him a little photo album, and he didn't know about this project, but I said, oh, I've been doing this for the past year, and ridiculous thing. And he went, oh my God, I can't get enough of this. Oh, we're going to so he became an advocate for Celebregum and very generously arranged for an actual art gallery show, which was our holiday party that one year. And then he, when I decided after a couple of years, I think I've done this enough, I want to kill it, I asked him if he'd be in a very special episode at the end, in which he took a putty knife and scraped the gum off the ledge, and that was it. So it was, you can, if you want, look into the sort of philosophical angle of, oh, the transience of celebrity, and are we all chewed up and spit out by fate in the same way that an old piece of gum is, and oh, the public's fickle tastes of a who's up and who's down. And you can find stuff to be meaningful about if you want, but it was also just gleefully stupid.
Yeah. And then you saved the gum, right?
Yes, I have it in my apartment in a little box not too far from here. So if the Smithsonian calls, I'm ready.
I say wait by the phone.
Yeah, I do.
And then didn't Paul McCartney walk by you as you were picking the gum up?
Oh yeah, that was the crazy last day of the gum. Apparently the studio security said, Sir Paul, could you just wait over here for a minute? Something's happening out on the sidewalk. I guess they didn't really want an old piece of gum landing on Paul McCartney's head. Okay, you're free to go now. And so I run down to the sidewalk to retrieve the gum. Where is it? Where is it? And Paul McCartney just walks by me like 2 feet away. And I just thought, this is one of the strangest days of my life, but that's what I get up for, hoping to have days like that.
I also, you sent me the cut and paste movies. I find that to be very funny.
Oh yeah, that is another gleefully stupid project where I just cut apart the little capsule descriptions from old TV guides of what movies were playing somewhere on TV that week, and figuring out how to reassemble line by line things that grammatically work and yet make utterly insane movies that, oh my God, I think I would love to watch this. It doesn't exist. Too bad, but at least we have a tantalizing fragment of movies that never existed that I slice up and put back together. So that's an Instagram project, cut and paste movies, and it's just purely for my own amusement, amusement of a few hundred other people who've come across it. But yeah, I can't devote too much time to it because it can get into an epic session with 2,000 scraps of paper on the desk, and maybe, yeah, it is a weird puzzle, but satisfying once in a while.
And I've seen you're doing a couple short films with Deva.
Yeah, we've continued to work together. We've got a whole range of things we're trying to get out into the world. We've written some scripts together in the last year or so, and trying to have meetings about those. But we did make a couple low budget short films out in New Mexico in the fall, just itching to make something. Oh, I loved the world of getting out on the road and shooting stuff with bathtubs, and just, all right, here we go, we're making something. So especially after the Letterman show ended, I have had other jobs here and there, but just the addictiveness of, I'm going to write something and then it's going to be made and it's going to exist.
Right.
When you don't have that, or don't have it as easy, you come to miss it. And Deva's fantastic at saying, well, we don't need a huge budget to make something. Let's write something that we know we can make. And she shot these couple of short films with her iPhone, and she's obviously a brilliant editor and knows how to get everything really high level. So yeah, we made 2 short films, which I wrote and which I also acted in, which is a bit of a change for me. And they're now out in the world on the film festival circuit. We've recently won a jury award for one of them at the Sonoma Film Festival, and fingers crossed we'll get into a few more. So yes, just keeping the creative juices flowing on that.
Is that something you want to do more of?
Yeah, we were just talking recently about what else can we conceive of in the short films. They are addictive if you think, well, it was not that hard or expensive to get something we were really pleased with.
Right.
Let's think about what else we can do. So I'm sure we'll have others.
Cool. I look forward to it. We'll wrap up on this. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. But now it's that half hour where I get to ask you questions.
Okay, you can go. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'm very interested in maybe you've covered this extensively elsewhere, but how did you get into comedy, and what has your path been?
Well, I started when I was 17.
How old are you now? You look like you're 17 and a half.
I'm 26 now.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. You found the fountain of youth somewhere.
Thank you.
I have not.
Oh yeah, was it a requirement to grow a beard after the show ended?
No, it was just about a year ago. All my beards I've ever had have started with laziness of, oh boy, it's been 2 weeks since I've shaved. You know what? I'm going to make it look like I was doing something deliberate. So I just ran with it.
But yeah, I started when I was 17. Just starting to like feature out on the road and stuff. I'm moving to New York in June or July.
All right. Well, hopefully that'll be a good time to get here.
Yeah.
Kind of on the upswing again.
Yeah. We were supposed to move in January, but we pushed it back. So yeah.
Yeah. Summer may be the sweet spot for hitting it. Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah.
So I've done a couple stand-up times only long ago, and it is crazy nerve-wracking. So all respect to you for walking out on that tightrope.
When did you do stand up?
A couple times in Boston in the late 80s before I came down to New York. And if you're doing an open mic night, you benefit from extremely low expectations. And if you're not horrible, people are, oh, this isn't horrible at all. I love this. So I mean, that's sort of seductive on the first rung of the ladder. But I know from talking to many people who've said it is a very hard life, and you have to be utterly committed to it and really driven to get any degree of success or respect or whatever. So I did not have the gene that made me need to do that. And once I got in the writer's room at the Letterman show, I thought, yeah, this is fine for me. And surprisingly, I found out much later, I did have some sort of gene for performing. And you see in the Bathtubs movie that I get up in front of crowds now and do shows and lectures and entertaining presentations and all that. Not really quite stand up, but something akin to it.
Yeah. I'm always interested, like, people who are just comedy writers, because with stand up, the path to get into it is sort of obvious, where you like sign up for an open mic and then you just kind of go from there, you figure it out. But with comedy writing, it seems like it's less obvious how to get started in it.
Well, it is even now puzzling to me many days. I mean, it's a very, very different business now than when I was coming up, and just the whole world of obviously the internet and all the streaming platforms, and people have Instagram and YouTube and TikTok and influencers and stars on the internet. Nothing that I could have ever imagined. So, yes, I'm the old guy with a white beard, and I'm tragically unhip now. But I'm always thinking that good, hilarious writing, there are ways to be a writer, and you don't need to be a performer. So much just begins with getting something on the page that makes somebody else go, oh, this, I could see how this will be terrific. And great performers, I always want to emphasize, terrific performers bring so much more to it than what's on the page. And I've seen my own stuff and other people's that looked okay on the page suddenly seem brilliant when the right people get a hold of it. And editing also, every writer should be friends with a great editor. I learned that at the Letterman show, and that's why I wanted to stay in touch with Dava. I thought, I don't know what she's going to do next, but I want to know where to find her someday if I'm doing something else. So that worked out very well. But yeah, some of it is just, I mean, there are script competitions and people querying agents and managers, but a lot of it is networking and just getting to know people. And so somebody says, oh, you know who you should talk to? My friend over at something company, and they do a lot of weird comedy that I bet you'd be a good fit with. And so you try to just meet people and know people, so you can be the right person at the right time when something comes up.
Yeah. So any other questions for me?
Oh yes. What are some of the objects behind you on your shelves?
All right. Well, I got a Freddie Prinze album,
Okay.
Rodney Dangerfield,
Oh yeah, I see him. Okay.
Richard Pryor,
Okay.
Red Fox,
Oh wow, yeah.
and Rolling Stones' Some Girls.
I thought I recognized that one. Now, does this mean you were growing up from a young age immersed in comedy and, oh, I want to hear all the comedy, I want to be in comedy?
Yeah, pretty much. Like some of my earliest memories, like watching Seinfeld, and I remember watching a Chris Rock special when I was probably way too young to be watching that.
But were you able to say to yourself at that early age, I want to do this as an adult, as a career? Or because I lacked that ability to even formulate that thought. But now, whether it's just you or a different era, seems like people do that much earlier, more reliably now.
I think they do. I was in like 7th grade when I realized that I wanted to do stand up.
Well, that's wonderful that you get that glimmer of light up ahead early on that you can swim to. I was not a comedy nerd. I grew up not particular. There were funny things that I loved, but I never coalesced it together into this drive for my destiny is comedy. I'm very lucky that I hit some little gust of inspiration in my college era that steered me toward it, but could have easily not happened.
If you hadn't have found that, what do you think you would be doing?
I don't know. I mean, maybe if I had some way with words and certain kinds of attitude or tone or something, maybe I would have gone into advertising. I think there's a lot of overlap. I've talked to a few advertising people who admitted that they had dreamed of being a Letterman writer or whatever, and one way or another it didn't go down that path, but there's probably a good overlap between the sensibilities there.
What'd you go to school for?
Well, I was an English major, but it was kind of a default of, I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess that's what writers want to do, and I'm going to hopefully be a writer. I didn't know what I wanted to write. I didn't really. It was so hilarious, just the nebulousness of it, which I think is not possible anymore because people are groomed from an early age to be prepared for college and line up everything, and it's so competitive. I grew up in Massachusetts, and until I got the application for Harvard College, I did not know Harvard College was in Massachusetts. I thought it was, oh, it's got to be in New York City, I guess, like the I don't know, Federal Reserve or whatever. It's all probably in New York City. So I was amazed to learn that it was actually in my home state. I don't think very many people get to be that naive anymore.
Yeah. Now, when you they're kind of like just tell you that it's expected of you to just go to college, figure out what you're going to do. I chose not to go to college, but I was one of the rare ones.
All right. Well, if you've got your own thing going on, there's certainly a very long, illustrious list of people who've had the sense of self and the vision to say, I don't need that right now, or maybe ever. I've got a thing I need to do. So, well, good for you. But just make sure you read a few books.
Oh, yeah. I enjoy reading. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So we'll end on this. What's one thing you know now that you wish you had known when you were first starting out?
I wish I had become more adept early on at understanding that I was in a business. I had the luxury early on at the Letterman show and for 25 years of just going to a place every day and doing a thing with some other fun people. And I did not feel particularly connected to the entertainment business.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've learned, well, you got to learn how to play the game and know the system and be educated about who to talk to and what the business needs and all that. So I'm catching up on that now. And I wish, as much as the Letterman show was a wonderful little island out in the middle of the ocean away from much of the rest of the entertainment business, I would have probably been well served to dig into the business end of it a little more.
Right. Well, thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Well, and good luck with coming to New York City. Keep me posted on how that works out.
Thank you. I will.
All right. Well, I'll come see you when you're in a club.
I'd love that. Yeah. Good to talk to you.
All right. My pleasure.
Thank you. Hey, baby, I hear the blues are calling. Tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Mercy. And maybe I seem a bit confused. Yeah, maybe. But I got you pegged. But I don't know what to do with those tossed salads and scrambled eggs. They're calling again. Scrambled eggs all over my face. What is a boy to do? Mabry has left the building.